Hey, what's up, everyone? So I've been putting off releasing this video because this is the webinar that I did on masculine and feminine energy. Because I was actually just kind of ashamed at my performance. To be honest, it's very fumbly, in my opinion. I'm a little bit hard on myself, as we all kind of are, our worst critics. So I sat on it and I was not impeccable with my word. I was not really kind of jiving with what's in the Four Agreements, the book, because I stated some things and then didn't fulfill those things. I already adjusted the date when I did the webinar, and then I did the webinar and I didn't publish it. And later on in the video, you'll hear me say that I had a beta program that I'm going to launch, and I stated the day. I didn't state the date, but at the time when I did it on June 3rd, I did meaning well to do it the following Thursday, and I didn't do that. So there was a couple of times that I just wasn't in integrity with my word. So you have my apologies for that, and I appreciate your grace and patience. So all that to say is I sat on this, putting this out because it's embarrassing. I'm just going to put it, I was embarrassed. It's not my best performance, and I'm not shy about being on camera or speaking in front of people. I just didn't perform well. So there's that. What I want to speak to, though, is about this beta program. I do have intentions to do it. Now, whether or not I do it this coming Thursday, as I say in the video, which would be, I don't know, June, let's see, I think I may have the date wrong, 24th, something like that, perhaps the 23rd or 24th, is yet to be seen. So don't hold me to that. When I'm ready, I will put out another video and another link to let people know that I'm ready to do the beta program. The thing is that I for sure want to talk about and teach and explore with others this idea of masculine and feminine energy. That is absolutely true. And I need it to be stated very clearly that regardless of if your genitalia denotes you as being a man or a woman, it doesn't matter. We're not talking about sex. We're not talking about gender. We're talking about an expression, an energy. And every single one of us embodies both the masculine and feminine energies. That just needs to be clear right off the bat. So the program that I'm wanting to do in the beginning is to just set the foundation, like an introductory level type of a program to get people introduced to the ideas of what this masculine feminine energy is, what it looks like, how it's expressed, and then, how it may work in a sexual kind of a context between partners, creating polarization for attraction, and that kind of a thing. But that's not the only thing that I want to explore. And then later on, in some other program, I would definitely like to develop this more in-depth exploration of our sex, because I think sex is a giant thing for us to talk about. Now, this is outside of the scope of this webinar, and it's outside of the scope of the beta program, and the other, once it's out of beta, the actual program that I'm talking about, because that'll be an introduction. But I do want to state and declare that I definitely have an intention to go deeper into the spirituality of sex. And I don't talk about this in this webinar, but I think it's very important to state that it's a very, very much a goal of mine to explore that. And if anybody is interested in more of the spiritual side and like the depth of like our sexuality rather than just a physical act, then just keep an eye out for what I'll be developing at some point throughout 2021 and going forward. So without further ado, here is my fumbly webinar, my introduction. I did it, so I'm going to pat myself on the back for that. I went out there and I spoke. It's a bit rough, there's no doubt about it, but there it is. And if you enjoy it, great. If you don't, great. Doesn't necessarily matter. And again, keep an eye out for a link, because I will for sure be doing an introductory program on the masculine and feminine. That's going to be open to both, both genders, men and women, because both can benefit from this information. So thanks again for watching, and until next time, I love you guys.
Well, thanks for joining me today, everybody, about masculine and feminine energies. Today, I woke up and just as I do most of my things is a little bit off the cuff, but the imagery that was coming to me was about a battery. This idea of polarity of two different poles. And of course, I was thinking about the movie The Matrix, and not sure if you guys have, if you all have seen that or not, about the human being being a power source, for the machines. And the endearing nickname that they give us in that movie is Copper Top, right? For the Duracell battery. Anyway, so the image of the battery came to mind, and with the two different poles, the positive and the negative, which of course lends itself to this whole idea of masculine and feminine. And I do also want to start by saying that some of these topics may not be, some of the language may not be safe for work or smaller ears and that kind of a thing. And then also I need to just make sure that everybody's aware that this idea of masculine and feminine doesn't pertain to gender in the sense of like sexual organs. Like, it doesn't matter the genitalia that you have. Masculine and feminine energy is just that. It's an energy. And if that doesn't resonate, if the word energy doesn't resonate with you, then I would offer you to think of it as perhaps masculine power or feminine power. It's just an essence. It's a characteristic. It's an energy. It's a way of being. In a way, it's a characteristic, I guess, is the best way to put it. And the other thing to mention is that we all engender both the masculine and feminine energies. And as I go through this, I'll exemplify how even inanimate objects such as rocks could be said to have masculine and feminine energy, like where you can see these things, these characteristics be displayed and engendered and just embodied by different things, where you can start to see it literally everywhere in your life. So what does it really mean? Is like, what's the basics? Like, what is the basics of masculine and feminine in this particular context? What does it mean for masculine energy and feminine energy? What is it at its core? It's distilled version. At its real basic sense, at a real basic level, to give it a fundamental start, feminine energy is just a state of being. It's a state of just being, it's just there. It's being receptive. Here we go. Here's Melanie. Hi, Melanie. I was just going through and pretending like I had an audience. So, hey. So I almost feel like kind of starting over, like in a way, which is good because I just had like a good dry run, in a sense. Okay. So I'll just do that. I'll just kind of start over. So I was just going on. I was thanking everybody for joining me for this. Sorry, let me just start over entirely. Thanks for joining me today on the masculine and feminine energies. And I just want to mention first off that some of what I may talk about may challenge ideas or be somewhat, I don't know if I'll get into anything that'll be necessarily offensive to some people's way of thinking, or for anybody watching this outside of this particular meeting, because I'm going to post this on my YouTube channel. Some of the information could be challenging. So having an open mind, allowing yourself to like consider things that are perhaps outside of the normal, I wouldn't say normal, but the indoctrinated way of thinking may occur. And I just kind of wanted to lead with that. And so this morning, I woke up and, I'm an off the cuff kind of a person. I didn't plan anything necessarily for this. I just sat over the last couple of days thinking about some of the stuff that I wanted to talk about. And so this morning, some imagery came to me about the idea of a battery. And, we've seen, most of us may have seen the movie, The Matrix, right? So we're endearingly called the copper top, in that movie, the human being the energy source for the machines. So regardless, the imagery of the battery with its positive and negative poles is obviously analogous to masculine and feminine energy. And I wanted to go with that particular imagery, but I'll speak more to that here in a moment, because the first thing I really wanted to get into is what does it mean to, what is it at its core with to be masculine or feminine? What is masculine energy versus feminine energy? And another thing I want to invite people to do is, if the word energy doesn't resonate, then perhaps swap it out with the word power. Masculine power, feminine power. It's really just a characteristic to give you an idea of like that it's an essence, it's a way of being, it's a characteristic of just being. And so as far as feminine energy goes, at its core, it's just about a state of being. It's about being receptive. It's about just allowing yourself to just be. It's a state of calm, in a way, although it doesn't always have to be. But that's what it is at its core, is a state of being. And it can be calm or it can be wild and stormy. It's just being. It's allowing one to just be, and its expression. Any form of expression is a feminine type of attribute. This is the example that I like to give men when they think that they don't embody any type of feminine energy. I say to them, well, when you get angry, you like to perhaps raise your voice or move your hands or do some other form of expression, right? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, well, that's being feminine. Anytime that you want to be seen or heard, that is feminine in nature. It's feminine in nature. There's no right or wrong with any of this stuff. It's just giving an example of what those natures look like and characteristics thereof. We all want to be seen and we all want to be heard. So that's the example that I go with for men that don't think that they embody feminine qualities or feminine natures. That, well, when you get angry, you want to be seen, you want to be heard. That's a feminine characteristic that you embody. The masculine is to be basically silent and encompassing, sturdy and grounded and present. It's basically the kind of the antithesis of the feminine, where a state of being, the masculine does, So what does the masculine do? Well, it stays calm. It stays, how do I want to say, creates the container for the feminine. It allows the space for the feminine to express and to be held, the stage, the container. The other way that I like to liken it is that, the feminine could be like the ocean, right? Or the weather, where it could be calm, it could be stormy, it could be peaceful, or it could be, a little bit chaotic. And there's no right or wrong. That's not a label, because we have a lot of phrases that take those characteristics and we demean them, which I'm not a supporter of. She's being crazy. She needs to calm down, that kind of a thing. That's how, to me, an unconscious masculine responds to the feminine. So the masculine creates the space, is the sky for the storm, is the boundaries of the world that contains the ocean. It creates the space for those things to exist, for that being to occur without any type of judgment, without any type of recourse, without any type of, reaction. Without reaction, the masculine should just be present and allow these things to be expressed. So that's the idea of between masculine and feminine at their cores. And I already just gave some imagery about how these things are expressed, both, a little bit from the feminine and a little bit from the masculine. But you can see, to go back to the imagery of the battery is one single unit, and it contains both the positive and negative poles, contains both the masculine and feminine energy. And the other way that I like to describe it is that it took both of these to create the human life, right? It took an egg and a sperm. It took a masculine and feminine energy and brought them together. So I tried to think of anything that was created on this earth that came from multiple parts that did not engender the qualities of the things in which it was made from. And I couldn't think of anything. I could stand corrected, but I think that that's pretty true for most things, at least living organisms for sure. So it makes sense that as individuals, we embody both masculine and feminine energies. So what does this really look like in a relationship? In today's world, we definitely have a lot of masculine type of energy. It's a man's world, they say, right? That's that kind of a thing. And we've shown throughout history, at least fairly recent history, that both genders, both sexes are totally capable of doing what the other one does, in the sense of that men can grow their hair long, they could be sensitive, they can take care of the home, raise children, that kind of a thing. Women can fight wars, they could be doctors and lawyers, and they can definitely go out into the workforce and make their own money and not be dependent upon what used to be traditionally male roles, that kind of a thing. So what does it look like, though, inside of a relationship? And for polarity, what is polarity? Polarity is where you've got the pole between the masculine and the feminine. And then when it comes down to what that does for a relationship, is it just creates a certain type of passion. It's just like any other type of opposites attract type of situation, where you've got two different poles on a magnet, and they definitely come together. The stronger the magnetism, the stronger the pole, the bigger the polarity. So if you want that type of attraction, you want that type of passion in a relationship, then that polarity has to exist. And how does that show up? And like, what does that look like? And for a lot of guys these days, it's that idea of the masculine, of being present, of being able to be the container for the woman to express themselves, without judgment, without being like, you need to calm down, or she's being crazy, is fairly lacking for a lot of guys, because in a way, no fault of their own, we honestly weren't modeled properly for a long time. Like, our fathers didn't model it, but at the same turn, they weren't modeled properly. It's been passed down for quite some time. And to get into where it came from or why is not necessarily what I'm going to be getting into. The fact is that it's happened. And so where do we go from here? And to just acknowledge that that's true. It's happened. So what we got to do, the way it looks now in relationships, is that a lot of guys take the path of least resistance. They let their partners do the things, right? Because we've got even the sayings of like, a happy wife, a happy life, right? And it's kind of like, well, if she's going to be happy, she can do what she wants to do to make it, her way. And that's a very popular type of mentality that a lot of guys have in relationships. And while there's some merit to that in a regard, it's not really in the long run true. Spoken to enough women to where, like, I know they're totally capable of doing, and they do the things. They don't necessarily want to, you know what I mean? Like, there's some things they want to do, but there's definitely some things they'd rather not do, or at least have the help of, or have the man take over and do those things. So again, while completely capable, women are completely capable of doing, there's a lot of times that it's very nice for them to just relax and just be. And as men, we like to receive that, although we just normally don't know how to get that from our partners, because as men, we're actually doing that. We're the ones being. We're the ones that are more feminine than we are, and we're allowing our female partners to do, which is way more in their masculine. And yeah, in a certain way, it's way easier, right? Men, like, we're always looking for the masculine is always looking for freedom, or a release, or some type of, like, way of just the path of least resistance, in a sense. And so that's, if we have a female partner that does all the things, then A lot of guys will just totally go that way because they think their partner's happy. The partner's creating the life that they want, and they've got a sense of freedom about it. And so they're able to just not have to fight. They've released themselves from the obligation of having to do. Whereas a lot of times in relationships these days, women are out doing at work, and they come home and they're doing in the home. They're just doing all the time, everywhere. And they're not really able to relax into their feminine. And what you end up having is a complete lack of polarity. There's not a lot of passion in there. Guy, the male, isn't really doing anything to bring out a desire in the woman to bring passion to the table. And at the same time, the man may look at his woman and feel like she's very masculine and not really desire that either. So again, it's no fault of our own. It's just what we've been modeled. So to create the passion that we are looking for, we have to go and we have to find out what does it really mean to step in and be masculine, and what does it mean to really be feminine, and allow these things to occur to create that polarity, to really bring that passion to the table. And so there's a lot of examples of what this may look like in a relationship. I recently interviewed a woman who had an annual type of conversation with her husband, and it was always around the holidays and what they're going to do. And she was always the one that had to come up with the plan and contact everybody and work out the details, take it to her husband, and he would then respond and may not like the plan that she came up with, and then she would go back and have to redo the plan. So there's a lot of doing there for her, and that's just one example in that particular relationship, or just one example that some of us may be able to relate to. So when I posited the idea to her, what if her husband were to take on that role? What if he were to step into his masculine and to do that for her, like to take that on and create the plan, contact all of the people, take care of the details, do that, to be the man in a way, to step into that and take care of that for her. And what would that look like for her? What would her life look like? And the way she responded was very positive. Like I could feel her feminine open up as she thought about this idea. That allowed her to relax. That allowed her to just relax into her being, into her feminine essence of just showing up to these family things and just being there and enjoying the time and the space and not having to do anything. And it also would remove the conflict, because I'd also asked her, I was like, if he were to do that and he came to you with that plan, would you even like have to have a discussion about it? And she's like, no, if he considered everything that I'd want, which is easy for a man to do, basically, is to just listen to what his partner wants and then consider those things and then do those things. And she was like, yeah, if he considered everything that I wanted and then took care of all of the details and made the plan, she's like, I just sign off on it. She's like, we wouldn't even have to talk about it. So I'd like to mention that as a concrete example, because that's just one out of like a trillion things in your own relationships that you could probably go to. You could look at it as far as like, anything like family vacations, or like getting the kids to, daycare, or what are you going to do for dinner, even, like that kind of a thing. And just allowing his partner to just experience the family and not have to worry about doing and all of the things that went into it. If he were to do that, it would open her up open her feminine energy up, so he could receive that, which I know for a fact he would absolutely enjoy, because I was able to see it from her. It would remove the conflict entirely, so that way he doesn't even have to worry about having this annual discussion with his wife that I'm sure isn't pleasant. I'm sure he'd rather not have. And I'm very sure, because there's no more conflict and he's stepping into that role and taking care of his partner, they're probably going to have more fun. I could see where that would probably lead to her wanting to like exchange in a different way. And I mean, I'll just be explicit about it. It's going to lead to better sex. I mean, I've spoken to another woman about the same thing where she had a boyfriend. She went to work. They both worked. She went to work. She came home. She made the meals, took care of the kids. He'd go off, watch a movie, and just be, right? So he's in his feminine. He's just being, and she's in her masculine. She's just totally doing. And this man would then want, you know, to get frisky with her. And it's like, well, what did you do to like bring that out in her? What did you do? What did you do as a masculine trait? What did you do to engender that? It's not about earning it. It's not about like a tit for tat, like let's tally this up. Let's like, you know, not that kind of exchange. What did you do to inspire that response from your partner? Nothing. And so that's how she felt. She's like, no, because I've been doing all of these things. And so there's no polarity there, is what I'm getting to. There's no inspiration for the feminine, for the female in that particular relationship to be sexy, to be desiring of the masculine. He didn't do anything to inspire that. This causes a lot of frustration in relationships where then there's a lot of misunderstanding about why this is occurring. And there's a lot of guys, and on the same side, a lot of women too, I would assume, that just aren't aware of this dynamic of like what the masculine and feminine energies are and how they play out in our relationships. And so for me, it's just about raising awareness. I know there's a lot of guys out there that they have an aversion to words such as, you know, self-help, therapy, coaching, counseling. These are all words that men just naturally have an aversion to. I mean, we don't normally go to the doctors until it's a problem. The same thing is true in any relationship that most men have, is they don't really look to change until something is at critical mass. Either they're about to die from a heart attack, they're about to lose somebody that they love, or something catastrophic is occurring. And that's just the nature of the masculine, is that being that static is part of it. And I'm not saying that's it's a double-edged sword. Obviously, it's a good thing to have when you're creating a container, to be unmoved by the things that you're experiencing and to stand in your own power and be able to witness expressions without being attached or without being, you know, influenced by what you're witnessing when somebody is expressing something to you. But at the same time, to just be so obtuse and unaware that change needs to happen, because as a man, you also embody the feminine, like you're going to embody both of these. So there's a time to change, and it doesn't have to be when you're about to die or when you're about to lose somebody. A natural phenomenon of the woman, feminine, is to change. That's why it's like the weather or the sea. Change. That's another huge characteristic of feminine energy, is to change. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's absolutely necessary. So as men, though, we definitely embody this static type of like idea, and we almost like elevate it to some type of stoic virtue where it's like, oh, didn't change, you know, I'm the same man that I've always been. And it's kind of like, yeah, that is like okay to a point, you know, but that's also going to create a problem. You know, the thing is that for there to be that polarity, since your feminine partner also engenders masculine characteristics, like at that masculine part of her is going to look for that change in you as well, like to be pulled. There's going to have to be this fluidity of back and forth, of interplay. You know, it's always in motion. It's always in motion. You can't just be masculine 100% of the time. You can't just be feminine 100% of the time. There's a flow. There's this interplay between the two. And so in this regard, with sorry, I got a little bit of sidetracked here. So I'm gonna go ahead and mute Lynn. Hey, Lynn.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know I wasn't muted.
No, you're good. You're good. So let's see.
It took me.
Oh, sorry, I muted you now. What were you saying? Okay. So sorry. So I got sorry about that. So anybody want to help me out there with where I was at? I got a little sidetracked. So where I was at was with this inner flow. I know it was this fluidity of between back and forth between masculine and feminine. And so, yeah, I was talking about how how a lot of men create this stoic virtue in the mind of not changing, of just being the same, and thinking that's a solid thing, and how the feminine partner is going to look for that type of change. And so, where I was going to go with this is that there's a saying that I believe it was attributed to Albert Einstein. I'm going to paraphrase it, but the basic idea is that women marry men in the hopes that they'll change, but they don't. And men marry women in the hopes that they won't change, but they do. And so that just describes the nature of the masculine and feminine. And the thing is, though, is that since we're human beings and we embody both of these elements, we embody both of these energies, as men, we should totally give ourselves permission to change. You know, there's no reason for us to remain the same. It's rather unhealthy, you know. And then as women, like, as you've shown, you can totally give yourself permission to like be in the masculine and do, but at the same time give yourself permission to just be, you know, to just fall in and relax into that essence. Now, of course, what's going to give you, like, what's going to help engender that in the relationship, what's going to help bring that out between the two of you? Because if you're like some of these other women that I described, go ahead and doing all the time, and you come home and you just keep on doing because that's what is quote unquote expected of you, or like what your partner is looking at you to do, and that's just how your relationship's been, there's not going to be that type of opportunity unless you kind of forcefully take it, you know. And then if the partner's not aware of what you're doing or why you're doing it, that's probably going to create some conflict. Like if you were to be the feminine in the relationship and you go do at work, and then your partner's used to you coming home and doing at home, and then you just kind of go to work and you come home and you say, fuck it, like I'm not doing anything, I'm just going to be, your partner might be like, what the hell's going on, you know, and not understand how to respond, and not necessarily understand like that's a call for him to step into his masculine and be like, maybe I should do some shit around the house. Like there's obviously going to have to be some communication or some type of like, you know, consciousness around this. But to create that polarity is where this is going to happen. Like if the woman I interviewed the other day goes to her husband and says, hey, look, I want you to just take care of this, and like I'll sign off on it. Sometimes these conversations the feminine necessarily doesn't even want to have, but if she can plant the seed and just kind of be like, this is one example, like if there's other things like in our relationship that you could do, and like it just invite him, you know. Like I think that's the biggest thing too for a man, is to be invited. Maybe not told, if she didn't say, hey, do these things, but if she were to craft it in such a way of like inviting him to do it, kind of like showing up and being like, you know, maybe if there was, you know, a time when you wanted to plan this out, we'll see how it goes. And just invite him with a feminine type of energy of response, of being like open, kind of showing him what he might receive from her by taking that on. Sorry. And what I mean by that is that kind of enticing him with that feminine energy and kind of being like, there's more where this came from. If you happen to show up, like, you know, I'm going to invite you to do this, and here's what you could receive from me by doing that. And for me, when I saw that change in her, like it's an inspiration for me as a man to want to find out where else I can get more of that. in the relationship? Where else can I show up and step in to my masculine role and create that polarity, to create that, for me to receive more of that type of feminine energy? And when you create that polarity, like, it creates both both partners in a relationship are going to want to have higher quality sex, and the only way you really get that is, like, to go back to the other example of where that guy and this other woman that I interviewed, where he was just went off and he just watched a movie, but he still wanted to get frisky. What he really wanted, he wanted to have some fun, but he wasn't doing anything to engender that from her. And so for him to step into his role and to, like, take care of some of these, to perform the masculine role and, like, to fulfill that, to allow his partner to relax into her feminine, to desire to do that, to show up, to have the desire to want him that way. And that's a whole different quality of sex, instead of just kind of being like, we haven't had in a while, like, all right, like obligatory sex, like whatever, this kind of a thing, like, where you're just basically masturbating each other. Like, nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. People want passionate type of sex. And to have that, you got to create that polarity. And so that's kind of my hook to men, is like, we all know what you want. The women want it too, right? They want it just as much as the men do. They want to, like, want you. Like, that's the thing, is like, it's not that they're stingy. They want to want you, but you have to do shit for that to fucking happen. You've got to do shit for them to show up that way, to bring that out in them. And that's one of my hooks with guys, is to, like if this one woman's man were to show up and take care of the family vacation or the holiday stuff, guarantee you his wife would, there'd be no, she already admitted that conflict wouldn't exist. And two, the energy that she showed, he would totally take that in, and she wants to give that to him because he showed up that way. Just her imagining that, you could tell that's what she would do and how she would respond. So it's a win-win-win, so as soon as the guy receives that, I would like to believe that if he were conscious enough, that he'd be like, how do I get more of this? How do I get more of this? It's no longer, oh, I've got to do this thing because it's a chore or it's on a to-do list or any shit like that. It's about starting and having this polarity of, like, this just this reciprocation of energy. I interviewed another woman where, she said, like, she goes to work and she's doing all the time there. And her husband would be like, so how was your day at work? And she didn't want to talk about it. She didn't want to talk about it because she didn't want to talk about the shit that she did at work. She already was doing all day. She wanted to connect in a different way. How was she doing? Not how was her work going? Not even that. How was she doing? She was looking to her masculine to connect with her being. How was she doing? Not how was her day at work. So it's just these little nuances about understanding how to even create that type of connection, to create that polarity. And again, like, not necessarily a fault of his own because of what he was modeled, or like how he sees things, but it's the lack of polarity that really creates a lot of the conflict and a lot of the sexual dissatisfaction. And it's not necessarily the lack of polarity so much that creates the lack of, like, that creates the conflict. But it does play a role in an underlying resentment of understanding how these things work. So like the masculine and feminine energy. So what I mean by the man needs to be steady and solid and grounded is that when somebody, and it doesn't matter who it is, it could be his feminine partner, it could be his kid, it could be another guy who's pissed off at him, anytime he's receiving an emotional expression, he needs to understand what it is to be grounded and to be, like, solid, and to let that expression occur, to not give it any judgment, to just understand that that's that person's truth in the moment, and just let it be, and what that type of container means to somebody else. And I've had this happen too, to go back to the idea of that we all embody these energies, masculine and feminine. I like to give an example of how I was in my masculine. I was having a conversation, something was said, I got triggered, and which caused me to go flip it like immediately from my masculine into my feminine. The person I was having a conversation with at the same time immediately had to flip into their masculine to give me the container, to give me the space to do my expression. And then they called me back into consciousness where I flipped out of my feminine back into my masculine. And it's this happens without us even knowing. Like I wasn't even aware of it until after the fact when I reflected on it. And I was like, I just went from masculine to feminine back to masculine again. I didn't even realize what was going on. So a lot of conflict happens when two people are in the same polarity, like they're in the same energy. They're either both in their masculine or they're both in their feminine. Probably most likely both in their feminine, because they both want to be seen and heard, and neither one of them is giving the other one space. It's just like two fucking thunderclouds like smacking into each other, creating a fucking storm. All you did was create a bigger fucking storm, and nobody's there to create the container. Nobody's there to create the space. You're both just being expressive, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with being expressive. It's just that for it to be healthy, one needs to be one and the other be the other. Like do the ebb and flow, take your turn being the container and being the one to express. And a lot of guys, when they run into that wild expression, that, calm down, relax, that kind of a thing, it's because they don't know what they do with that energy. They simply just don't know. And this is so modeled in our media. Like I watch shows and I've made notes about which show, what episode, the timestamp of like, this is exemplified here. This is exemplified here. About like women wanting to feel safe, or like when a man is like, hey, you need to calm down, or like when they say, oh, women are crazy. Like it's everywhere in our media. Like it's absolutely modeled to us that way. We are not, that's why I say it's no fault of our own. We're literally programmed to think these things, to respond these ways. So yeah, when somebody, even if a guy and a guy were talking and one guy was, being a little bit wild or angry, he's probably not going to say that guy was being crazy, although he could be like, yeah, he's acting a little crazy. Or he might frame it slightly different, and he will probably give that man a little bit different leeway for sure than if he were to witness a woman or feminine like expressing the same thing. Much quicker, I think, for a man to go and be like, oh, she's being crazy, or she just totally needs to calm down, which is totally dismissive, and once these guys become aware that they are in their feminine when they're angry and want to be expressive, that kind of will probably change the tone, like when they understand, oh, when I'm pissed off and I want to be seen and heard, like that's me. Like everybody else would have the right to be like, dude, you need to calm down. Like they wouldn't want that to happen to them either. So I find it amusing now, having gone through some of this awareness that I've had and some of the things that I could look back on through my own experiences about how having received that type of energy and just understanding what it means to create the space for it to be. Because it's not an attack. When somebody is expressing themselves, they're just needing the space to do that. And I really came into this awareness too when I worked with a 21-year-old male back in March who was definitely in a negative space, and he was expressing himself as such. He was somewhat belligerent. His energy was definitely like antagonistic and just very, a lot of guys would probably view it as being like he's expressing his masculine side, and I saw it, I'm like, no, he's definitely in his feminine. He's just doing it in a way that a man might do, you know what I mean? Like a little bit different than a woman might do, but it's still an expression. And I created the container for him, to let that happen. And then as that was able to like just unfurl, as his expression was able to just be, then we were able to get to a place where he became still, where that energy dissipated. Storms don't last forever. So it was able to just kind of dissipate. And then we could get to a place where I could like actually work with him. And by the end of that conversation, like it was amazing. Like just at the things that we were able to discuss and like the awareness that we were able to get to. Sorry, which brings me back to like, I'm kind of rabbit trailing all over the place here, but this idea, these words that men have aversions to, right? Coaching and counseling and, therapy or, that type of thing. To me, it's all about awareness. And that's the word I love to use with men, is just awareness. And there's principles. To me, these masculine and feminine energies are principles. Like, they're no different than the principles of mathematics or the principles of physics. Like, there's just underlying like truths and principles about how these things work. And once you understand more about how these things work, then you can view yourself differently, and then you can view everyone else differently. Take that into your relationship, and like things just totally change because you're not seeing it in that same unaware state, like that you've been modeled, obviously in our media and other ways, from your parents and friends. Because with awareness, it's a little bit softer, because I like to tell people, you didn't know that 2 + 2 = 4 until somebody showed you and made you aware of the mathematical principles of why that's the case. And you didn't know how to spell a word until somebody showed you like the principles behind language and grammar and like how to structure sentences and all that. Like, it's no fault of your own. You just didn't know. And so like, now that you know, do better, right? Like, and so that's why I like to approach men with that type of language, is because, you say, you want to work with men and you say like it's counseling or coaching or it's therapy, like there's just such an aversion to that kind of stuff. And that's why I was saying earlier that men get into this place where like, and it takes something catastrophic most of the time for men to make the change. And that's where I was at earlier, where I got distracted about the masculine in your female partner is going to look to the feminine in you to be able to make those changes, to be able to be malleable, to be able to course correct and have that courage for changing, not just remaining static, not to just stay the same forever, because that doesn't work in relationships. And so there's that interplay, there's that fluidity between the two. Sometimes like there's going to be pieces of your partner that's feminine that may stay relatively the same, but they also could totally change. And so as a man, on the flip side, like, you should be open to the change too, because your partner is most certainly going to change. And by you not changing or growing or seeing that potential inside of you to like become into a different awareness about things, is going to cause conflict. And we know what that does, right? Conflict doesn't doing conflict in a relationship doesn't get you sex. It doesn't get you higher quality sex. It doesn't get you connection. Like, so you've got to, as a man, do the things to change. You have to do those things. You have to allow yourself to be that way. And it's not saying that you're any less of a man or that anything like that. It's just that you're growing. You're not the 5-year-old boy that you were, just as she's not the 5-year-old girl. Like, your body's obviously different. There's a lot of things that changed in your life. So allowing yourself to look at how these things work between you and your partner is really no different. And just have a different state of awareness. Don't take what you've been modeled and just call it like good, and just call it that's the way it is, and call it there's no other way to do it. Like that's taking, something, making it so static and unmoving to where your train's not going to move. Like, if you don't put the engine on the whole train, you're not going to get any deliveries down the line. You've got to be able to move that. And so that's where I was at earlier about the fluidity between the two, and understanding that there's this constant interplay. And the way I like to look at it too is that with this constant interplay, like, we're creating every single moment. Every single moment's got masculine and feminine energy. Every single piece of our existence has got this embodiment of masculine and feminine energy. We're creating every single thing through the interplay of these two energies. They're always present. So to give an example of an inanimate object, because I was thinking about this too. Okay, so like, say you have a rock, right? A rock, just a rock. It's just being there. The first thing it's doing is just being there. The rock's just being, right? And you could say that that's feminine. The rock's just being feminine. It's just being there. It's just doing its thing. It's not really doing anything. It's just being. and say it's sunny out and it's receiving the life of the sun. It's receiving the heat of the sun. So that's another feminine quality, receive, right? And so the rock is going to warm up, and a snake might come and lay upon that rock. And now that rock is doing something, right? What is that rock doing? That rock is providing that heat to the snake. It's now being the space for the snake to rest. It's the doing the doing of the rock is now giving out that energy that it has received. And that may not be the best example. So another example that I like to give is like learning something. As I just said earlier, you didn't learn that 2 + 2 = 4 until somebody taught you, or that awareness came to you. Well, your mind can be considered feminine by nature when it's just being still, right? And then it receives these thoughts, it receives these ideas. Your mind is being penetrated by knowledge. That's a masculine thing, is to penetrate or to do. So it's the mind is receiving that, and something is doing that to you. Something is bringing that to your awareness. Something is penetrating that awareness into you. And so you're receiving that. And so that's another way to show guys that, like, you obviously have this embodiment of masculine and feminine energy, is that you have to be open to receive new information, regardless of what it is. Like if you're a car guy and you take care of cars, or like, you've got a couple, classic cars that you polish up, like you had to learn how to take care of that. You had to receive that information. That information had to be penetrated into your mind. Something had to put that into you. And so you had to receive that. That's a feminine quality, is to receive, And so the masculine is obviously the penetration to do that, to bring that into awareness. And so that's just another type of analogy that I was coming up with earlier, and one that I used when I was speaking with that 21-year-old male. Because like the things you know, you do, right? The things you don't know, you learn. And the things you do, you obviously are action oriented, you do them. The things you learn, somebody models that, or you receive that from them. Somebody's providing that to you. They're penetrating your awareness. You're receiving something from them. So the whole mechanic is masculine and feminine. Like you're always embodying these energies. You're always doing these things. And so I just like to just kind of give some examples of that, so that way it's easier to go through your life and kind of see where these different things show up, because it's always present. It's present in everything. And so when that awareness is in you, then I think it's easier to go to your relationships and kind of be like, all right, so what am I witnessing now? Like, what am I interacting with? And like, how is this working for me? And like, what awareness, what do I get from this awareness? So, yeah, so that's my, sorry, I was just reading here. So I was just, that's kind of like where I'm at with this right now, as far as just giving this idea. I could kind of go on a little bit, but yeah. So what I just wanted to use this video for really is just to kind of give like core principles and just basic ideas of like what these energies are, what they look like, how they show up, what the interplay is. And I do want to say that I am going to be doing a beta program on this, as far as getting into like deeper like incarnations and deeper understandings of the masculine and feminine. It's going to be a 6-week beta program, and I'd love for people to like be a part of that, to give me feedback, to kind of see like what it's like. And I'll be starting that next week, next Thursday. I'm just going to keep the same time and same kind of model. And just kind of go through for 6 weeks and get into that. So I guess I would like to open it up if anybody has any questions or anything of that nature. I'd be happy to talk or answer, or if not, then I can give you a little bit of time back. I feel a little sweaty here. So anything from anybody? There's a whole group of us here.
So I have a share.
Yes. What's up, Lynn?
So when we were doing the interview with me for your podcast, we were talking about how Brian and I have been on that journey of masculine and feminine. And yesterday we came to this aha moment that when you are not intentionally practicing it, that it is easy to fall back into those old wounded energies unconsciously, like just on autopilot. And it was kind of surprising because I was totally in my feminine and wanted like to be taken care of and wanted to spend time with him. And he had just woken up from a nap was in it. And I just wanted to express myself, but so did he.
Mm-hmm.
And we came to realize, oh, wait, I need you to be the masculine energy right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thanks for that. That's true. Yeah, if you're not consciously doing it, and it's easy, you're right. It's totally easy to do that and just be reactive. And I think too, like earlier, since a lot of guys are going off what they've been modeled and they're not necessarily aware of these things, it's easy for them to be in their feminine because their woman or their feminine partner is typically doing all of the things, and so I think that's why a lot of conflict exists, is because when the feminine partner wants to express themselves, then the male partner is typically in their feminine, and so that they don't know how to respond to the expression because they haven't been modeled properly, and then two, when both people are in their feminine, as we kind of mentioned earlier, just creates that two clouds crashing into each other type of situation. It's usually just a bigger fight than it needs to be, or a fight that didn't even need to happen in the first place. So yeah, I agree. Being conscious about it's great.
I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
As a man, what was that moment or turning point that made you want to dive deeper into this? So this is out of curiosity, because a lot of the people, me, the people on the call might not know what I do, but I have a lot of women that I coach that are on this journey and totally in it to win it, but
Mm-hmm.
their partner is sitting over and observing. Do you think there's any type of like approach or technique, or like from a man's perspective, how did you get interested, or maybe what would it take to bring it up?
Yeah, I think that's a fabulous question. So for me, yeah, it's kind of interesting because I was made aware of this through a good friend of mine, Ashley, and then through one of her friends named Niall. And I that was probably back last February and March when I got introduced to the ideas on like a very basic kind of a level. And Niall said something to me that stuck with me the entire year. Where he gave me the idea. He's like, yeah, he's like, when these guys are out there being, all macho and they're being loud and like, they're at the football games or like whatever, and they think that they're in their masculine. He's like, they're not. He's like, that's actually a very feminine trait, and I got and he explained it to me and I was like, oh shit. I was like, that makes a lot of sense. Like, and so it just kind of stuck with me throughout the year. And then it was like in October that I tried to get into like David Data's stuff, right? And it just wasn't landing with me, and I thought it was a little funny because Ashley and Niall both had recommended his work to me. And then it was at the beginning of the year that I revisited it. I just came back and I was like, I'm going to try this again. And I listened to the book and I was like, this is fucking gold. And then I listened to it again and I'm like, this is fucking gold. So for me, like, I can absolutely appreciate for some men that this type of information will be alienating. It'll be challenging because it's completely opposite in a regard to what they're used to and what they have been kind of modeled and told. So I guess to like answer the question about how to like bring it to men in general is definitely something that I want to do. And so the way I've been thinking about it, and I've talked to a guy who's done a lot of men's work here recently. I talked to another coach who's been doing this stuff for like 12 years and working with men. And I was telling him my approach with it, and he liked it. He's like, I'm getting some ideas on how I can take this to my guys. And so that's why I like to use the word like awareness. And I think for me, like because the guys get hooked on sex all the time. You know what I mean? Like you can hook a guy with sex with anything. And so like, if you can just be like, look, man, and every guy's got conflict and everybody's got conflict in a relationship at some level or another. Just be like, look, if you want to reduce the amount of conflict that you have and like have higher quality sex, what does that sound like to you? You know, like, and be like, well, that's fucking fantasy. And how would I do that? And be like, you know, like, and so that would be my hook to them, is just, and not call it counseling, just be like awareness. Be like, look, if just invite them, be like, if you could become more aware of something that would reduce your conflict and like increase the quality and frequency of the sex that you experience, what would your life look like? What would you do? Like, would you check that out? You know? And like, I think a woman could go to their partner and be like that. What if I told you that you could probably gain a little bit of awareness around something that reduced, you know, our conflicts and maybe gave us better quality sex? And the man would probably be like, yeah, what's the trick here? Like, what's, you know, but I mean, again, I think it goes back to being invited, you know, instead of told. But I think too, like, I don't know, if my partner were to be like, hey, like, you know, even if we don't fight a lot, be like, hey, if, like I told you there was something that might, you know, like give us more fun in the bedroom. Like, would you want to check that out? I'd be like, yeah, I'd probably check that out. Like, you know, like, I mean, if nothing else, it'd get him something to like, you know, to just open the door, you know. And I think then too, like, depending on how it's presented, you know, how it's going to land with certain men, but I think to at least open the door for them, you got to frame it in a way that doesn't make them feel challenged or less than, and have it be something that they're invited into, you know, like that they're not being questioned, like their masculinity is not being challenged or anything, that they're something less than, and that they need this so that they can become more, you know. It's just more of like, how would this augment your already like how would this augment your masculinity and like empower you in a way, you know, and just invite them into that rather than like kind of forcing it or like giving them some type of ultimatum or saying it, you know, just, yeah, I think removing the challenge, because, you know, as men, we do seem to grow through challenge, but usually we like to be challenged by other men, not by our partners. So that's kind of the trick there, is that we don't want to be challenged by our partners in a way that makes us feel like they're questioning their ability to trust us, you know? Yeah. And so if they could feel like their partners like behind them, you know, like I'm bringing this to you not because I'm questioning your ability, I'm just bringing this to you because, you know, this could, you know, just entice them with a positive, I think. Like, yeah, that's why I kind of lead with sex with guys, you know, just because but at the same time, like, you know, it's an end goal for the feminine as well, like to have more connected, conscious, quality sex. I mean, why not, you know? So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of where I'd go. Yeah.
Yeah, it really did, because so many times when I know in my relationship prior and other relationships, when you come at it with, you know, accusations, or I used to very much make the men in my relationship feel bad about who they were. It makes, and we all know that's wrong, but it really does make sense to come at it as compassionate, and also with the end game implant, like, yeah, sex is enticing. That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
As I'm over here getting ready for dinner, so I have to jump off, but I really enjoyed this.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Lynn. I appreciate it.
Mhm.
And I guess one other ask that I have, if anybody's here, anybody watches this in the future, if you found, I'd love testimonials or what you guys thought, because I'll probably do this again in the future. So anything that you enjoyed, or how I taught, or presentation wise, anything of that nature, I'd love feedback. So you guys can email me at Zack at therealzackolinger.com, and that's Zack with a K, and that would be awesome. So I'll just kind of put that out there too. So cool. All right. Well, enjoy your dinner, Lynn. So anybody else got anything? Awesome. Well, thanks, Melanie. I appreciate it. Thanks for the time. And no worries. No worries. Perfect. Well, then I guess I'll just go ahead and wrap it up and let you guys go. No problem. Thanks, Emily. Thank you, Melanie. And I will talk to you guys later on.